welcome back to my channel. My name is Sarah and today I'm gonna start filming a queer horror reading vlog. I'm not willing to accept that the spooky season is over. It's still the start of November. We've got a whole month of autumn left before we start to have to think about winter. So I'm gonna savour every moment of it and yeah, just continue the spooky season with some more horror reads. And who writes better horror and scary horror than marginalised groups? I have a lot of queer horror on my TBR, so I just decided, yeah, that's what we're going to go with. And I have 3 books I'd like to read in this vlog. I'm not sure if I'll finish them, but I have a physical book, an ebook and an ebook. So I've got lots of options for reading just whatever I'm doing in the day, whether I'm like on my way to work or just like doing dishes or something. I will always have something to read. That's kind of how I like to read normally. I'll normally have like a different format of book on the go at once. So the first book I'd like to read is this one. It's Fragile Animals by Genevieve Jagger. I've had this for a while, since it came out in May, and I've been meaning to read it for a while and it just keeps getting put off. But I think this is the perfect time to read it. I'm just going to read the blurbs for all of these because I just truly don't have the brain power to put it into my own words. But this says, when an ex-Catholic woman develops a sexual relationship with a vampire, she's forced to confront the memories that haunt her religious past. Struggling to deal with the familial trauma of her Catholic upbringing, hotel cleaner Noelle travels from Edinburgh to the Isle of Bute. There she meets a man who claims to be a vampire, and a relationship blooms between them based solely on confession. But as talk grows sacrilegious and the weather outside grows colder, Noelle becomes hounded by the memories of her past, her blasphemous sexuality, and the love she lost while stuck in the closet, of her mother's affair with the local priest and the part she played in ending it. This sounds like it features Catholic guilt quite heavily, which is terrifying in itself, and I just love like horror that focuses on religion. That tends to be like my favourite, like my go-to when I'm wanting to watch a horror film or read a horror book. Love to read about like kind of culty religions, so yeah, excited to read that one. Then for the ebook that I want to read, I've gone for A History of Fear by Luke Dumas. I'm not quite sure how you pronounce that surname, but this is set in Edinburgh, which is basically where I live. I live like on the outskirts of Edinburgh, in the suburbs. So I love reading about stuff that's set in Edinburgh, and I think it's a really good setting for like creepy horror books. I think Edinburgh tends to be quite romanticised as a city, and it is very beautiful, but it also has like such a darkness to it, and I think it really lends itself well to like horror thriller settings. So this says, Grayson Hale, the most infamous murderer in Scotland, is better known by a different name, the Devil's Advocate. The 25-year-old American grad student rose to instant notoriety when he confessed to the slaughter of his classmate Liam Stewart, claiming the devil made him do it. When Hale is found hanged in his prison cell, officers uncover a handwritten manuscript that promises to answer the question that's haunted the nation for years. Was Hale a lunatic, or had he been telling the truth all along? The first-person narrative reveals an acerbic young atheist, newly enrolled at the University of Edinburgh, to carry on the legacy of his recently deceased father. In need of cash, he takes a job ghostwriting a mysterious book for a dark stranger, but he has misgivings when the project begins to reawaken his satanophobia, a rare condition that causes him to live in terror that the devil is after him. As he struggles to disentangle fact from fear, Grayson's world is turned upside down after events force him to confront his growing suspicion that he's working for the one he's feared all this time, and that book is only the beginning of their partnership. So again, like horror with a like religious element to it. Sounds really good, so I'm excited to read that one. Then finally we have Jawbone by Monica Ojeda, and this is translated from Spanish by Sarah Booker. Monica Ojeda is an Ecuadorian author, I think, and I thought this was short stories, but I don't think it is. It says, Fernanda and Annalisa are so close they are practically sisters, a double image, inseparable. So how does Fernanda end up bound on the floor of a deserted cabin, held hostage by one of her teachers and estranged from Annalisa? When Fernanda, Annalisa and their friends from the Delta Bilingual Academy convene after school, Annalisa leads them into a thrilling but increasingly dangerous rituals to a rhinestoned Dior-scented drag queen god of her own invention. Even more perilous is the secret Annalisa and Fernanda share, rooted in a dare in which violence meets love. Meanwhile, their literature teacher, Miss Clara, who is obsessed with imitating her dead mother, struggles to preserve her deteriorating sanity, each day she edges nearer to a total break with reality. So I think maybe it's like multiple POVs, and that's why I thought it was short stories. But I think that sounds really interesting and weird. It might be a little bit too weird for me, but yeah, I'm looking forward to listening to that one. I'm still trying to finish The Witching Hour by Anne Rice, but my book's due back in the library in a couple of days, so as soon as that goes back I will make a start on this. So just aiming for the 3 in this vlog. I'm going to film it over probably about a week, so I don't think I'm going to finish all 3. I'm hoping I'll finish at least 1, but we'll see, and I'll get back to you when I have a few more updates. Hello, you'll have to forgive the slightly rustic appearance today. It's chronic eye infection season again. I've been doing really well with my reading this week. I finished A History of Fear by Luke Dumas and I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars. It was a little bit slow, I think, at first, and I was just struggling to get into it for maybe a day or 2, and then I got to about 150 pages in and then like my pace just like really picked up, and I ended up reading, it's just over 400 pages long. I ended up reading just over half of it last night. Just sat and read for like 2 hours and got it all finished. I don't really read that quickly normally, and yeah, it takes a lot for a book to be able to capture my attention for that amount of time without me just like scrolling on my phone or just doing other things. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. This is the story of an infamous killer called Grayson Hale. He is a man in his late 20s who moves from the US, grew up within a very religious family, almost like culty kind of setting, and he's moved to Scotland to study Scottish literature as a postgrad, to kind of follow in the footsteps of his father, who moved there in the 1970s. His father has now died, and he just wants to find out like what drove him to leave Scotland so abruptly and then just turn to becoming a priest, I think he is, in this like religious order. So he goes there and he meets a mysterious man called DB who asks him to help him write a book. So he's ghost writing a book for this guy called DB on a history of fear. It's like a history of the devil in Scotland, and he's just like, I want to warn people that the devil still exists in Scotland. People used to be very afraid of the devil, and now they've just got lax, and I want to just remind them that there's still a lot to be fearful about. And he's just a very strange individual. He seems to be a little bit ethereal, is that the word? Like, he doesn't seem entirely human at a point. It seems like when he's around, he's managing to manipulate people to do stuff that they wouldn't normally do. So like, he's sitting in a restaurant with Grayson and some kid just starts like throwing chips at him, and he's just like pretty sure that DB is making him do it, making people like attack other people and steal, and just he sort of quickly becomes convinced that DB is the devil basically. And that's a lot of the story of just Grayson sort of trying to grapple between whether he should write this book or not, trying to get out of writing it. He signs a contract and it seems to become very difficult to get out of this contract, and he's just like trying to find ways where he can escape it, and then he's just like, oh no, I should actually write it, and he just like flip-flops between those two things while just trying to live a normal life, and things are just getting a little bit weird in his life. He starts to see like mysterious fiends and like creatures, and all this time he sort of becomes friends with a boy called Liam Stewart, who's also a student at the university, and Liam is murdered. We know this from the start. Grayson is convicted of the murder, and he's just telling us his story basically. This is like a story, the way it's formatted, it's just like you read the introduction and you're just like, this is Grayson's story in his own words. He left this, he dies by suicide in prison, and he's left this manuscript for us to learn sort of what happened with the case and sort of his life up until that point. And it's edited, there's like edited notes in there as well, and like extracts of like newspaper clippings and things from like covering the case, and sort of interesting things about Grayson's life up to that point that could be relevant to why he allegedly murdered this student. And yeah, I thought it was really good. The atmosphere was really good. It wasn't that like pacey, but I just couldn't stop reading it. There's not a lot of plot. I think a lot of the negative reviews said that it's quite slow, and I really liked that. I think the writing was good. I think the setting of Edinburgh worked really, really well. So Grayson is a student from the US. He's come to live in Edinburgh, and I think the same is true for the author. I think he's American and he studied for a time in Edinburgh, but he's written Edinburgh really well. And he's written just life in Edinburgh really well, and it's not sort of like glamorized. Like there was a part where he's just like talking about people living in these like crappy flats in Abbey Hill, and it's just like, that's like actually where people in their 20s live, you know? Like it's not just like, oh, he's staying in this like amazing flat like overlooking the castle and stuff. And it's just like, no, he's in a crap house in a pretty crap part of the city that just looks like any other city. And I really appreciated that. I liked sort of knowing the landmarks and the places, like the bars that they were drinking in. I like places that I'm familiar with. If like I haven't gone into them, I at least know sort of where they are and I've walked past them. So yeah, it was really, really good. There's themes of abuse within a religious setting, like culty behaviour, repressed homosexuality, and yeah, I think Grayson's just a really good unreliable narrator. He kind of seems to have this psychotic break, and you don't really know like what actually happened, and what is just like a figment of his imagination. We never really know if DB is real or if he's just somebody that Grayson has made up to kind of process what has happened to him. Yeah, I liked it a lot, and I would definitely recommend it. For my audiobook, I said I was going to read Jawbone in this vlog, and I didn't. I instead read, well, I'm reading at the moment, She's Always Hungry by Eliza Clark, and I guess you could categorise this as queer horror. It's definitely like stories that are queer and are at least, if not like explicitly horror, they're unsettling, just as Eliza Clark does really well. So it's a collection of short stories sort of all based around the theme of hunger. So we have like somebody who has like cultivated like a tapeworm to help them lose weight and is now trying to like flog that to other people. There was a story that I really liked that was just a series of reviews for this one takeaway. It's like Just Eat reviews, and it's just everybody has ordered from this one takeaway that and they're all in different parts of the country, and they're just like, oh, I ordered and it's like 83 miles away and it got here in 4 minutes, and it's just really weird. And I liked that story. I thought it was really funny. I think as a whole, I don't think the collection is working for me quite as well as I would have liked. I really like sort of the individual stories and like sentence by sentence, the writing is really good, but I don't think the stories like put together necessarily work for me. Thing that Eliza Clark is really good at writing, I think, is internet culture. I think she's a really funny writer. She's sort of maybe moving a bit more towards like the speculative and sci-fi in some of these stories that I'm not a huge fan of, mostly because I don't read a lot of sci-fi anyway, and speculative, it's not like my preferred genre, but I particularly don't like it normally in short stories because I find it quite hard to sort of like get my bearings in the world, and I think that's largely the point of writing speculative short fiction, that it's supposed to be a bit weird and you're not really supposed to know what's going on. But I just don't really like that, and I like to just have a very stable footing within the world. So I like a lot of like backstory, and I like to know what has happened. I don't just like to like know exactly what is happening right now. So I struggle with that. I'm not a huge fan of the more speculative leaning stories. The ones I like are just the ones where it's just people in like everyday situations, and I think it's really good on audio. Eliza Clark narrates some of the stories herself. She narrated Boy Parts, and I just thought she was so good at that. I just love hearing like a Geordie accent, because I have a lot of ties to that area. A lot of family members are Geordies, so I just think she writes in a way that is very Northeast England, and I don't know how to explain that, but it just, like, even without the accent, just the writing, it really feels like it was written by somebody from the Northeast. And a lot of the narrators, because there's loads of different narrators in this, a lot of the narrators are also from the Northeast. I just think the writing lends itself really well to those accents, so enjoying that. I think Eliza Clark writes internet culture really well. There was a scene with in the first story with the tapeworm. I think that's been my favourite story so far, although it's very triggering because it talks about eating disorders and like quite graphically, but that's been my favourite story so far, I think. And the narrator is just talking about how they discovered they had a tapeworm, and then they sort of head to anorexia forum, which is presumably like Reddit or something, and they're talking about tapeworms, and people are like, oh, where can I get a tapeworm from, and like that kind of thing. And it's just like, oh, an orthorexic vegan like picked a fight with me saying that I'm being cruel, and it just like really made me laugh. And it's just like, I think she just, yeah, really sums up internet culture really well. So yeah, I'm enjoying that. I think I have 2, maybe 3 stories left, and yeah, I'm glad to have read it. It's, I think, a bit of a departure from what I'm used to from Eliza Clark, which is good. I think she's a very innovative and varied writer. I think she has a lot of range. I think what makes Eliza Clark such a talented writer is that although she's writing across a lot of different genres and she's writing from a lot of different perspectives, I think you can always tell it's her writing, even though the stories are very different and like the themes are often quite different. She just has a very distinctive voice that lends itself well to sort of like a variety of different topics and genres, and yeah, I really appreciate that in her writing. I think it's always a bit of a cop-out to describe something as Black Mirror-esque, but I feel like these stories really are. Even the stories that aren't more speculative / horror leaning, I think are just quite reminiscent of Black Mirror in kind of the style that they're written in. They're very unsettling, even if it's just, you know, a conversation between 2 people, or a guy like working in a bar and sort of becoming infatuated with a woman. Like, it's just very sinister and unsettling, and I got that same feeling when I watched Black Mirror. They were quite like San Junipero-esque, I think. So yeah, I'm really enjoying this collection, and that's my audiobook that I've got going on for the time being. I've also started reading Fragile Animals. I'm not a huge amount of the way through this yet, maybe about 15 pages, and this follows a woman who is basically fleeing Edinburgh. She's just like gone to the Isle of Bute, which is like a very remote island in Scotland, and she's going to stay there just for a week or two. She hasn't taken her phone, hasn't told anybody that she's going, and she's just kind of going to like escape something. We're not really sure what that is yet. I really liked the writing style at first. Like I said, I'm only 15 pages in, but on the first page it starts with, I have many wounds from the cold thing called claustrophobia, bruises on my thighs, lungs that cottonize in the winter, a myriad of snippeting scars hidden in creative and domestic places across my body. And then further down it says, the ferry leaves me behind, travels homewards to the mainland, cracking the glass of the water. And it's this really beautiful, rich writing that I loved, but I think it might be a bit too much. It keeps going, and just like every sentence is a bit like that, and it's very beautiful, but I don't think it necessarily makes a good reading experience. So I'm not sure how I feel about that, but like I said, I'm only like 15 pages in, so I'll give it a shot. It's definitely piquing my interest, and it's an easy read so far. So yeah, I will let you know when I have finished this. See you again. I have finished reading She's Always Hungry by Eliza Clark, and I love this collection, and I take back what I said about not enjoying the more speculative side of her stories, because there is a story towards the end about, I don't want to give too much away about it, but it's about a cannibal goddess essentially, who, like, it's the end of humanity, and she's like reigning over everybody, and they're all just like living in fear of her. And it was such a good story, so bizarre and weird and funny. Like, I actually laughed out loud reading it. I think Eliza Clark's so good at dialogue, like writing conversations between characters. She's just like, she nails it every time. And yeah, just the humour, really funny. She's great at writing very obnoxious characters who are very self-aware in how obnoxious they are, and just don't give a shit about it. It reminded me a lot of Boy Parts, that particular story. Just the tone of voice was quite similar. She was quite like, the goddess is just very arrogant, and like just like clearly just thought everyone else was beneath her. And yeah, it's just really, really good. And yeah, overall I enjoyed the collection. I gave it 4 stars, and I would highly recommend it. I've also made a little bit of progress with Fragile Animals, and I'm enjoying this. It's definitely not something that I'm just compelled to read all the time. It's very readable and easy to read, and I'm enjoying it well enough. I'm just not particularly drawn to it. I'm going to carry on with it, but yeah, I just haven't sped through this one at the same pace as maybe I sort of read the last 2 books in this vlog. But yeah, it's really good. It's about a woman called Noelle who runs away to the Isle of Bute, where she meets a guy who says he's a vampire, and they're just like starting to spend time together, and that's basically as far as I've got. What I really like about this is Genevieve Jagger is autistic, and she's written such a good autistic character. I think this is definitely one that I can relate to a lot, in the sense that she's a very nomadic kind of person, not in the sense that she moves to a lot of different places, but that she just feels like she's there, and sort of surrounded by these like groups of friends, and like she definitely has acquaintances and like people that she spends time with. She's not really sort of lonely per se, but she's just sort of orbiting these kind of like different groups of people, and it's just like she'll have like interactions with them, and maybe sort of they will be described as friends, but she doesn't feel any like meaningful connection with them. And I really get that as an autistic person, having lots of like people around me who I can talk to and just be like comfortable with, I suppose, and enjoy spending time with, but not necessarily having like a very deep friendship with. And I kind of struggle with that as an autistic person, just getting beyond that like acquaintances level, if that makes sense. So I think that aspect is really good. There's a paragraph as well in this chapter called Careless Homosexual, where the main character Noelle says, Lorne, her housemate, once told me that I do the worst of both, talking about and not talking about myself. He said it was unequivocally my most annoying quality, and I related to that so much. Like, I just am somebody who like completely keeps my cards to my chest and doesn't reveal anything about myself, or I'll tell you everything about my life in graphic detail. There's just no middle ground. It depends how I feel about you as a person, I suppose, but it's just like, yes, like that is exactly what I do, and it is my worst quality. Why am I like this? So yeah, there's just been a lot of moments where I've been like, yeah, I can tell this author is autistic. But yeah, overall, oh, and but just like when she meets the guy and he says he's a vampire, and she is at first like, he's like, oh no, really, I am. And she's like, okay, and just like believes him and takes it at face value, because why would he tell her that he's a vampire if he isn't? So yeah, I'm really enjoying it from an autistic point of view, and it's nice to read autistic characters that are very relatable and like have those sort of very like stereotypical autistic qualities, but are also very nuanced as well. I think a lot of the time when you have an autistic protagonist, a lot of the story hinges on the fact that they're autistic. I don't think actually it's mentioned that the protagonist is autistic. I'm kind of reading into that based on the author, I think, but like she's definitely autistic coded. But yeah, the whole story doesn't like revolve around her autism. It's just like she is a character is existing in a world and happens to be autistic, and we get that side of her, but it's not like the main crux of the story. I think it's quite refreshing to read a protagonist like that. So yeah, I am definitely going to finish this book. I'm enjoying it well enough, and I think I'm going to end the vlog there though, because I want to get this video uploaded, and yeah, I don't know how much time I'm going to have in the next few weeks, because my partner is going away at the weekend, so I have sole responsibility of my 5-year-old for an entire weekend, which is always daunting, but we're going to do some nice stuff. Like, it's almost Christmas now, so we're going to have a little Christmas party, I think, just the two of us, and just do some fun Christmassy things, and yeah, it'll be really nice. And I think this is my last autumnally vlog before I move into the winter content, which is exciting. I like winter, but yeah, also sad because it feels like it's like autumn just was very short this year. I'm going to go now because once again I am rambling because I don't know how to end videos. If you have made it this far and would like to leave a comment but you don't know what to say, you could leave a vampire emoji, a devil emoji, yeah, something like that, for just something horror themed. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you again in another video soon.